Welcome to Design is Marketing, a podcast for product teams and marketers who want to learn what works and what doesn't when it comes to engaging and converting users. This podcast is brought to you by Sparker, the design agency. If you want to know more about it, check sparker.co. Welcome everybody to a new episode of Design is Marketing. I'm your host, Federico, and my guest today is Tina Fisher. Tina has an amazing career. She started as an entrepreneur with the company Snap and Save, for which she has been awarded as Entrepreneur of the Year. She is now CMO of Intix, a fintech company. With her, we're going to discuss about product-led growth and B2B marketing for fintech companies. Stay until the end because this episode is packed with content. Tina, pleasure to have you here.
Thanks very much for having me. I've had a very varied career, which I find really interesting. I think I need to always have change. I started my career, well, I'm actually Canadian by birth, and then I moved to the UK, spent some time in Africa, and I've worked globally. I started my career in the pharmaceutical sector. So I did pharmaceutical marketing for many years. I had a background as a registered dietitian and worked in hospitals. And I got a really good foundation of strategy. So particularly, how do you apply a marketing strategy across many different regions? And the whole, 80-20 rule applies. So 80% of it will be global, and then 20% of it, makes it local. And that's the part that's really going to make you succeed. But I realized after doing that for just over 10 years that I wanted to be in a smaller, faster growing organization, particularly tech, and the adoption of tech. So then I was consulting to a number of different businesses within Africa, payments operations all throughout Africa. How do you move money from one country to another, particularly cash? And a number of different organizations. Virgin Active, I was their responsible for strategy and moving into other African countries. And then finally co-founded a business in Southern Africa, which is called Snap and Save. And it's a PaaS, so it's a B2B to C platform that has FMCG companies on one side and consumers on the other. So you're doing B2B and B2C marketing at exactly the same time. But the benefit is that you're bringing consumers and the brands they love together so that there's a mutual relationship between the two of them. Did that for 5 years, grow the business to really be quite successful, over 1 million consumers using the platform, and really revolutionize the loyalty sector in South Africa. And then more recently have moved into a role as Chief Marketing Officer at Intix, which is a very different sector. It's in the banking sector, very fintech oriented. It's proving to be having a lot of different opportunities and different changes. So it's been a real area of growth.
And then your last step is being CMO for the company where you currently work, right? Intix. Before we jump into that, what I'm curious to know, what were the struggles, when you were coming from a very strategic role, like what you had before in the pharmaceutical industry, to then really starting your company from scratch, like validating product market fits and all the other things that you have to do as an entrepreneur?
It was definitely a struggle on one hand, because I think the struggle that we had in the very beginning, myself and my co-founder also came from a very strategic corporate background. And we were almost too intellectual in our thinking, too strategic in our thinking.
Too high level.
Too high level, exactly. And sometimes you just need to put stuff out there, see what sticks, and then move quickly. So we learned that very early on in our process of actually just trying things. And your customers will tell you what's going to work and what's not, with the market, social media, whatever it might be, product adoption. I think that was the primary learning in the beginning. I think later on, it was definitely from an investor perspective. And I think we hear a lot about that. It was the resonance of investors in the market and their ability to remove their own bias from what they're going to invest in. So obviously we came with lots of proof points and statistics backing up, why this was needed in the market. And oftentimes investors look at, gut feel, or they can't see themselves in why they would want to invest in it. And yet they're not our target market. So our target market, for Snap and Save were people who really wanted to make the most of their money. So, either they're just trying to get to the end of the month to the next paycheck, or they're saving for a rainy day. But that is the point. It's making more value of their money. So I think those are the
Yeah.
two things. And then also the third thing actually was often being the only female in the room and having a more female oriented business. 60 to 70% of our consumers were women because they still make the purchasing decisions in the home. And again, that proved to be somewhat of a getting over the bias, if you will.
Because I guess the investor scene was probably very heavily male dominated. Is that correct?
I'd say
Right.
99.999%. Yes,
Okay. So
absolutely.
how did you manage to overcome this? Like, what tip would you give to a female founder that kind of wants to have an edge into a male dominated world?
So often, and I would say it's not even often, every single time I was the only woman in the room, talking about purchasing decisions of women and why they would make certain things and decisions. And it's really statistics. It's use cases in other parts of the world. We could refer to, for instance, in the UK, they have a loyalty program called Nectar Card, which goes across stores, which goes across different sectors of the business. And so it was really having to be proof rather than I have this great idea and here's a gap in the market, because they weren't necessarily seeing themselves in the problem. So that's where
Yeah.
the actual statistics was helping. It was very difficult, being on stage, whatever that might be. So I'm hoping it's changing. But there is a statistic that said that I think is it only 2 or 3% of the world's VC investment is in women-led businesses. So
Yeah, got it.
we've
So
got a long
for
way to go.
you, it was not just the problem about the fact that you were female yourself, but also since you were solving problems of female, like it was hard for you to have them empathize with the problem that you were solving. Did I say it correctly?
Absolutely, that's it too.
Okay.
That's it too. Yeah.
Okay. Well, still, the venture was very successful, right? So, would you like to share about what made the success of that story?
So it was really understanding our our customers. And of course, we made things difficult for ourselves having two groups of customers. We had actual consumers, so from a B2C perspective, and our other consumers were the FMCG companies, and they too, the very, very different needs.
Okay, and
But
FMCGs for the ones who don't know it, what is it?
fast fast moving consumer goods.
Okay,
So
great.
anything you could think of in a supermarket or a pharmacy, that those type of products. And so they have two very different needs, obviously, and it's like a seesaw. So if you think of Uber, if you have too many drivers and not enough riders, that doesn't work. If you have too many riders and not enough drivers, that doesn't work. And so you're having this seesaw in terms of supply and demand between both sides. And it's kind of maintaining that demand on a constant
Yeah.
basis.
And I think actually to enlarge, every platform has always one side that is more scarce, right? And the other side, which is lured to the platform, say with the promise of finding more of the resource that is scarce. So actually, I think the success of every platform is how good are you at finding the scarce part of the spectrum, so that the ones that go there because the other one is scarce have the incentive to come on your platform and stick there, right?
Exactly, exactly. And there's always that tipping point where then you don't have to find the scarcity, it finds you. You're a
Yeah.
proven entity, and then the balance doesn't seem to be so difficult anymore.
Okay, yeah, got it. So it was really a platform business.
Yeah, yeah. So absolutely. So you're from an FMCG company perspective, they're getting access to consumers, they're understanding, doing very segmented and targeted promotions, and they have access to this platform and this data. And then on the consumer side of things, they have access to cashback or loyalty from all the brands that they love, regardless of where they shop. So it was back and
Right.
forth.
And in your case, which one was a scarce audience to find?
From a consumer perspective, I wouldn't say it was quite easy, but I think that our acquisition channels were very, very targeted. And word of mouth, particularly, was such a great channel for us to be able to get consumers. It was much more difficult on the FMCG side. So you have to have a certain number of consumers for businesses to be interested or trust or having a proof point of getting involved, with the
Yeah.
organization. So that was difficult in the beginning. So we self-funded. We put a lot of products on there to have use cases and test cases, and then we could
Okay.
then back to the organizations, and then
Okay. Nice. Interesting.
slowly they were interested.
So it was a bit of a chicken and egg problem. So you needed a critical mass of users were not that hard to find, but then with
Yeah,
nothing on the platform, there was no incentive. So you needed a
exactly.
critical mass of users so that producers of goods would want it to be on the platform.
Exactly.
Wow. Wow. Interesting. So you self-founded it basically, and you decided to put the products there yourself.
Well, we had to in the beginning. We had to
Wow.
in order to
Ah,
get
brilliant solution.
the
Right.
the different consumers involved, and then also too, then we could go back to the organizations and say, right, here's what happened. This is how many units you sold. This is who bought it. This is what they're interested. This is also what they purchased. That type of thing.
Wow, that's really amazing. One of the things that really defined the success of your company was the fact that your growth was really led by your product. Would you like to tell us something more about that?
Absolutely. So, while I was saying before, acquisition of consumers to the platform was relatively easy. Whether it was word of mouth or it was through social media or what have you. What was really quite our challenge was getting people to stick. And so what we did is we almost in the funnel, it wasn't about how many people visited our platform, is how many people engaged and the different levels of engagement. So engagement could be, they've gone through the process, they've submitted their receipts, they've gotten cash back, and they've done it a number of times throughout the month. That's what we considered our gold standard. And so what we did is we changed the product from a consumer perspective to make it stickier. So we incentivized people. So for example, we gave everyone who came onto our platform a free chocolate bar. And we incentivized them to go out and buy a chocolate bar up to a certain value, take a photo of their receipt, upload it to the platform, and then they would get their cash back. Why did we do that? Number one, we wanted to walk people through the system and the process so that they would understand it. Number two, it incentivizes them to take this ownership and go through it. And so we found that once we built certain elements in the product like that, our retention levels went up much higher.
Nice. So you had identified basically what was the minimum action that generated retention within your platform, right?
Exactly. So if we knew our goal was our stickiest people would be uploading, for example, 3 or 4 receipts and get cash back 3 or 4 times a month, if that was our ultimate goal, we need to figure out how to do that. So the drop off between people landing on our platform and our site and achieving that 3 to 4 times a month was significant. So then how do we have milestones throughout that process to get people to move through it? And it was
Oh,
by changing the onboarding process from a product perspective that really made a massive difference.
oh, cool. Yeah. So, like, also to make it more generic, like, this is really one of the issues that a lot of platforms have, right? Especially at the beginning, is to identify the action or set of actions that make your consumers stick to the platform once they have made it. Like, for example, there's a famous case of Twitter. And what they thought at the beginning is that people would have sticked if they would have done or made their first tweet. Whereas actually what they notice is that the people with the majority of tendency to engage with the platform were the ones that were following, I believe, more than 11 or 12 accounts. So they were, in the onboarding, they were doing everything to really make sure that you would, generate, follow more than 11 or 12 accounts right from the onboarding. So for you, it seems like it was something very similar.
It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. And the nice thing about it is if you have all the data in front of you, so it's about A, figuring out what is that sticking point, and B, how to get people there, and then C, incentivizing them to move to that place.
Nice.
And it's all through product. Yeah, exactly. It's
Okay.
product like, yeah.
So it's about discovering, let's say, the power of that behavior that if you do it at the beginning, it really generates engagement. Like, do you maybe remember some numbers on how much engagement change from before to after you introduced this test?
Oh, significantly. I would say between 30 and 40% more
Oh,
people are
that's
moving
very high.
through the process. Yeah. And the thing is you can't know what that is in the beginning, right? So you have your process, your onboarding process designed, and it's only through data and over time as more and more people, I always say it's your bucket, right? Where are the holes? Where are the leaky buckets? Where's the water coming out? And those are the holes that you need to plug.
Yeah.
And it's over time that you're kind of doing initiatives in the product to increase your engagement and your onboarding, that then you can see what the impact is going to be.
And how did you discover that? Was it only looking at data, or was there also some qualitative research involved?
I suppose a little bit of both, but I think that when you are building the product, you understand it in and out. And you can't understand why maybe your consumers would drop off or not understand the process. So it is asking about, okay, so you're seeing a big drop off between, different levels of your onboarding. And we asked some of our super users as well from a qualitative perspective, what was the biggest hurdle and that kind of thing. So it's a combination of qualitative and quantitative data that really should inform the product attributes that will help you with your growth.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, very interesting. So, is there any learning that you got from there that you now brought to your latest position, CMO at Intix?
For me, what I've learned from this is that it's looking at the entire user journey that is important from a marketing perspective and a product marketing perspective. It's not just about outbound campaigns or outbound messaging. It's about getting the consumer or the end user involved until they've actually finished the onboarding process. And of course, then you have churn and retention and that kind of thing. But it should be the entire user journey is what we should be looking at.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really one of the points of also like this whole podcast, right? This is exactly one of those situations in which design, marketing, and user experience go hand in hand, because then the success of the onboarding, the success of activation is also, say, that first experience that you have with the platform or with the product that really generates higher engagement throughout the rest of your lifetime as consumer. Yeah. And what is Intex today? Is it a platform? Do you have anything like a product?
Intix is completely different. So for me, that's what makes it interesting. It really is a software as a service
Yeah.
for the financial institution. So for large global financial institutions that are in the fintech space, essentially, they have billions of payments and transactions going through them on a daily basis. And Intix provides a solution that amalgamates all the transactions in one place so that you can see them in a single window, so that you can analyze, you can have alerts, and you can actually then, be able to take your data and use something with it. You would think that a lot of banks, for example, have something like this, but because of legacy systems, the data is all throughout in different areas. And so it's very difficult to consolidate the data in one place.
Yeah. And so, what's your method to kind of market the platform? For example, what I remember, well, I was in fintech as well before. One of the things that we noticed really worked is that we were selling not to just one person within a bank or an insurance company, but to multiple people. One of these, say, persona, for example, was developer. So what we did, we developed a SDK that people could download from our website and start already using the product before having any contact with sales. How was it with you?
Exactly, it is because it's decision by committee. in many
Yeah.
banks rather than you have one champion. And so you have messaging for the different personas. And unfortunately, in every single bank, the decision making person or body is a different persona. So you kind of have to figure that out a little bit as you go. So whether is it the IT system, IT people in this bank, or is it the payments and operations, or is it the compliance? So we're very specific on our personas and getting them in front of the personas to solve different problems. So largely it's about, okay, what is the problem in this particular institution? And then how can we solve it?
Got it. And so, what are the, say, things that you're trying to do to kind of get in front of each one of your different personas? Can you maybe map it for the ones who are into fintech or industry and are curious to know how to do it?
So I think it's very different for sorry, I'm just going to start that again. I think it's very different for different organizations. In our particular sector, it is very important to get in front of people, to actually have a face-to-face meeting, to have a conversation with them, to discuss what the benefits are of our solution. I think every bank has this problem that they have segregated transaction data all throughout. They don't necessarily know how to solve it. And so our biggest block is about awareness. And I liken it to the when Steve Jobs came out with the smartphone. He said basically that no one knew that they needed a smartphone. And so it was his job to kind of to sell the idea of it. And that's what we're trying to do. We're creating demand that, yes, we know that you have this problem, and actually this is how we can solve it. Because
Yeah.
otherwise,
So
they
there's a
don't know
lot of
how to solve it.
education that goes into that.
A lot of education, a lot of expertise in the market. This is what we do on a day in and day out basis. So that's the other thing is positioning our expertise in the market as well. So demand, expertise, and then also very specific persona based messaging.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's really interesting. Is there anything specific that you've tried that worked? Something
Well, we've just
unconventional or not done before?
we it's interesting actually. I've not been with this organization for too long, but what really has worked is events and conferences. And in the past, I would have said events and conferences were kind of an old way of doing marketing, particularly before COVID. They're very expensive with very little return. And you can't measure the awareness, and people sometimes forget about it. But in this instance, the ability to sit down and have a conversation with the target market, with the actual personas, has really been very, very fruitful. So it's who are you targeting and what is the best way of getting in front of these people to get your message across?
Nice. Yeah, that's very interesting because I also think there's some kind of like circularity, right, into this thing. So something works, and for some years everyone does the same thing, and then all of a sudden, when that channel saturates, then you discover that something that looks like old-fashioned or not done for many many years, then all of a sudden is up and trendy again because then no one was doing that for quite a while. It's probably also the same with, like, for example, email and then physical letters or texting, calling, this kind of things.
I
Yeah,
think it also
cool.
really depends on who you're targeting. I think that also, for example, we're not in a business where, I mean, yes, SEO is important. Please don't get me wrong, and PPC, but I wouldn't say it's the primary method or channel of engaging with our customers. It's something that
Yeah.
we need to do, but someone's not necessarily going to do a Google search, or because they don't, what are they going to Google? They don't really know. It's not like I need a CRM system. And so therefore I'm going to evaluate the different CRM systems that are on the market. So it's been a really interesting challenge, excuse me, to have to create demand and have lead generation all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds very interesting because also I can imagine that probably for an industry which is so niche as yours with like very few players, something like SEO, it will never give you the volumes that you need to kind of rank high on Google if someone writes something like fintech.
No, but exactly. I mean, it's something you have to do, and it's part of your foundation, obviously. But as I said, it's not our primary channel, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I've been really surprised about the impact of in-person events. I think because it is so targeted, so specific, and then again, it's very, very account-based marketing as well. It's very specific to each organization that we're dealing with.
Yeah, wow, sounds amazing. Well, Tina, I want to thank you for all the experience that you share with us today. One last question. So, how can listeners find you if they want to contact you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Tina Fisher. It's probably the best way of getting in contact with me.